Hello, my name is Brittney Thomas. I am a master's student at the University of Illinois in the Dairy Science Focus Lab, and today I am going to give you a presentation on the effects of rumen-protected lysine that was fed to Holstein cows prepartum and how it affected their calves' blood, amino acids, and the metabolite profile. So our take-home message from all of this research was that rumen-protected lysine fed to those cows can reduce medical events in their male offsprings, as well as increase the plasma and methionine lysine concentrations. Here is a copy of my poster, and now I'd like to go into details to explain a little bit about my research and the results that I found. To start, I'm going to give a brief introduction and the methods and materials that was used for this research. Lysine is an indispensable amino acid, which means it must be added into the cow's diet. What we wanted to do is to add this rumen-protected lysine to the cow's diet and see how it affected the cows and the calves. What we did was we fed this rumen-protected lysine 30 days prior to calving. Once the cow calved, we separated those calves into two different groups. Control, which meant their mother did not receive any lysine, or a pre-L, pre-lysine, which meant that their mothers did receive that lysine prior to calving. Our object was to determine if this RPL fed to those cows had any effect on the calves' amino acids and metabolite concentrations in the first 56 days of life. 72 Holstein calves, 37 were male, 35 were female, were used for this research. We collected blood from days 0, 2, 7, 14, and 28 from those calves and to see how those blood metabolites affected treatment and sex groups. This slide shows the example of the timeline of how we broke up the blood drawing from those calves for the first 56 days of life. As you can see, we took a bunch of samples on day 0. We also took those samples from day 2, 7, 14, and 28 for most of our data. We also took samples from days 42 and 56 during weaning and the end of trial. Now I am going to talk about the results. Now I'm going to go into detail about the graphs and the tables. So this table 1 shows the least square means and the standard deviation for the plasma amino acid in those calves. Right at the top, you can see that the total amino acid, the pre-lysine group, was greater than that of the control group. If you go about halfway down to this table, you can see that the total percent of lysine, if you compare the control versus pre-lysine and male versus female, there's not a true significant difference. However, we did see a significant difference when we tested treatment versus sex. There is also a difference in the methionine between the male and the female group. As well as the glutamic acid, we see a difference between comparing control male, control female, pre-lysine male, and pre-lysine female. This first graph shows you the total methionine amino acids, and from here on out, the graphs will be on the x-axis is the days old, as well as what we are looking at on the y. So on this graph, we can see that on day 0, females were lower than the males, but as the 2 weeks increased, the females eventually became greater than that of their male group. This graph shows the total glutamic acid from those 0, 7, and 14 plasma samples, and we can see that on day 0, most of the groups all started off in the same boat. As the 2 weeks went on, you can see a wide spread of how the 4 different kinds of groups branched off from each other, being that the control female was the highest and the control male was the lowest. This last figure shows the total percent of lysine for the amino acids. What we can see is we also broke them into the 4 groups, comparing the controls versus lysine, males versus females. And as we can see here that the control females were significantly lower than that of the pre-lysine females. However, it was the opposite for males. The control males were higher than that of the lysine males. So in conclusion, when feeding cows the rumen-protected lysine, we saw a reduction in the medical events on those male offsprings, as well as the calves that came from the cows that had supplemented rumen-protected lysine. They showed an increase in plasma methionine and lysine concentrations. I want to also thank Ajinomoto for supporting this research, as well as all the nutritional companies that gave us all of our supplements for the cow diet. And I also want to thank the Dairy Focus team and the University of Illinois for helping us with this research.